I think when you have boys and girls in different classrooms is that teachers can take advantage of students wanting to work. The idea is that students are not as distracted by the opposite sex, that they're not trying to impress somebody else, or that they're not trying to get embarrassed by the other person. And because of that, the focus can be more on academics than on the other person that's around. And so they might take advantage of learning more in a single-sex classroom. It's not that it's necessarily better, but you might have an opportunity more for some students that aren't as focused on schooling, perhaps. Just because you have boys and girls in separate classes, you have to have a good teacher. You have to still have a good school. And that issue is for all classes, not just single-sex classes. You need to make sure that they are learning what they're supposed to learn. That's everywhere. Sometimes when people say the disadvantage is because they say they're missing out on the opposite sex. My response to that is that, one, we already have a lot of problems inside of co-ed classrooms, particularly these days for boys. The failure rate for boys is too high. The gap between boys and girls in reading is too large. So something is missing inside of the co-ed environment. The other piece that people talk about is the missing of the opposite sex, and when will they get to socialize? When will they get to know? And that is not an issue. There's plenty of time in the day to go play with the opposite sex. In class, in math class, they have to focus on math. And if they're not, we're missing opportunities in this world today. It's better to understand boys and girls in any classroom. Single sex is not necessarily better than co-ed. Single sex can give you unique benefits that co-ed doesn't have, because students will tend to participate more. And if they're participating, there might be better and more learning. That might happen. Teachers in co-ed classrooms must understand how to teach boys and girls better too, because they have boys and girls. And because the issue of gender and sex is already in the classroom, teachers have to understand how to work with it. Not try to ignore it, not try to pretend it isn't there, and not try to squash it, but how do we work with it? So I think gender is actually more important for teachers to understand in co-ed classrooms, because they have the dynamic going on. And too many boys are failing in co-ed classrooms. And so it's not saying get rid of all the co-ed and put in single sex. Single sex needs to be an option. Single sex needs to be a choice. But teachers in co-ed need to say, how can I better reach my students too?